So the next year, I'm not sure what my one thing will be, or my theme, or my 10 things, or however many things, but I do feel that it's about the process of creativity. And creativity and learning are things that resonate with me the most. So, how can I flow with that creative energy and that energy of learning to expand what it is that I'm engaging with and learning about? And how can this process of self-dialogue and extrapolating extrapolate to other things? And that's something that Tim Ferriss talked about in one of his videos. He was mentioning a chess champion who was also able to advise businesses and then be some champion in some kind of sport because he extrapolates the way he was able to learn chess to become a champion to other areas of life. So I feel like I need to expand into that because Tim Ferriss also mentioned not putting all one's eggs in one basket, having a bunch of different baskets. So I do want to diversify my creative portfolio and move into creating artful things like music, for example. And I do want to focus more on gratitude. So Tim Ferriss mentioning 3 things that one is grateful for. And off the top of my head, I'm grateful for Hearty Nutritionals micronutrients for providing a way to taper off medications and have a nervous system free of psychopharmaceuticals. And I'm grateful for my iPhone for being able to help me talk to myself like this and being an impartial, unconditional, non-judgmental witness for this entire year. Never speaking back to me about what I'm saying, not saying it's right and wrong or judging it or saying it's stupid, just listening and being a mirror. And I'm also grateful for the sun. I love the sun. It's the best thing in this universe. And I don't think I mentioned in my last video, but I did cave and have a little bit of coffee. Oh, I made a video of me caving. Here it is. This is my first sip of coffee in 4 or 5 months, and I'm having about a quarter of this cup. And I'm just hoping it'll give me a bit of a boost because I'm feeling kind of, I've been sick for days and I'm just no longer going to resist my feeling of wanting some coffee. Maybe I'll switch to yerba mate when I can get my yerba mate from my other place in a couple weeks. So I was resisting having coffee and I'm glad I had some because I feel like it gave me an energetic boost, which I might need a little bit in my current situation, which isn't that bad. I'm grateful for it. Though I'm seemingly needing an energetic boost. And I will switch to yerba mate when I'm able to get my supply of yerba mate, which is stored somewhere right now. I can get it in a week. And interestingly enough, Tim Ferriss mentioned that his favorite smart drug or nootropic is yerba mate. And I used to drink that stuff daily, and I stopped when I was in California. So I will get back on the yerba mate, I think, being back here. It's good to have that little boost. So yeah, I feel like I have a bit of trouble with energy right now, even with the micronutrients. I made a bit of a list of my possible 1 things. So gratitude, being more grateful, and moving my brain towards that orientation, as I have had that orientation for a lot of the years in the past 10 years. It's this last year or so that's been challenging in terms of that. And learning to write, starting a business, getting more linear, it seems. I've created a lot of content, so how does that translate into daily life, into linearity? And this applies to people who go into altered states non-volitionally. how do we take some of that information and apply it to daily life? So, how do I take all this context I've created for myself in the last year, which in a way is a form of creating a subtle altered state for myself, a state of creating my own perceptions and talking about them. And in a way, I've created my own universe for myself. And this context has been a protective bubble. So I do wonder if I'll need to keep creating that context, or if I've created enough to move into creativity without worrying about creating more protective context. This is more expanding into areas without referencing the mental health aspect. And I mentioned shorter, better quality videos of some sort, and perhaps making a documentary. Lifestyle design is big. I need to really figure that out in the next couple of weeks, and I'll have a better idea in the next couple of weeks what might be happening. And even if it seems it might happen one way, I need to decide if that's what I want. Is that the lifestyle that I want? And music production, and also taking really good care of my body, because when I really think back to these last 5 years, the times that I've been happiest is when I'm being anal retentively healthy, eating superfoods, eating raw vegan, or eating vegetarian paleo, kind of extreme ways of food orientations I really do well with. And I think that's partly because it's healthy, but it's also a real gesture towards extreme care of the body on the physical level. And this last year, I've really focused on context and words, and that is mental. And the year or two before that, I was in peer support, and I wasn't taking as good care of my body as when I worked at a medical clinic, where it was very supported there to be really healthy, such as raw vegan and things. And I felt really healthy, and I felt like I radiated that health, and that just made my whole world feel so good. So I haven't really been able to afford eating that way because it is quite expensive. Especially this last year, I haven't really been working very much because of that psych ward stay in April. I've been trying to keep my stress really low. Now it's time to take my hearty nutritionals. Grateful, grateful. This is gratitude. This is a gesture of gratitude, feeling grateful for the micronutrients. And I'm wondering if I can create the business around having a creative non-self. And I feel this is part of trans consciousness. One has a self and is able to function, and the self part is for the skill of taking very good care of the body, for example, that kind of functioning, whereas the non-self is the creative aspect. So perhaps it's a mixture of both. And having more baskets, having more mediums of creation, and learning new languages of creation, such as the language of creating music using a specific platform, such as Fruity Loops, FL Studio on the iPhone, for starters. And I used to make music years ago. We're talking 2008 and 2009. And I didn't really get good at it, but it was fun. So I might actually create a video next of those songs playing back to back, because I don't think I did that yet. And that would be cool to share, to prime myself to getting into that mode in my brain. And it'd be cool to learn how to do these things and maybe share that with others. Not everybody's going to want to talk to themselves for a year, but people might want to create music or learn to create a blog, or things that I've done that I'm not really good at, but it'd be cool to help people set up their creative process as a business, perhaps. So that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in doing that. Imagine translating a mental health diagnosis into a creative business. Imagine going from sitting, fearing one's own brain, to creating a structure that when the brain is really creative, there are channels for that energy to go. And then that process is fun, so one also does that on a daily basis, which embeds that in the neurology and neuroplastically changes the brain, so we move into being creative beings. And that's a theory. It could be one of my theories for the next year, moving into being a creative being and creating a structure where one can be creative, and if something comes through, one has a way to share it. So can this energy be channeled into lifestyle design, a business, being a creative being, new modes of creative channels, back to the original state before this energy was ever labeled as having something to do with a personal mental illness? Perhaps it's non-personal creativity. And I'm wondering if I will go back and harvest some of what I've created from this dialogue. I'm curious about creating a lexicon of some of the terms that I've created for myself and expanding on that to invite people to do the same for themselves, to create new words that are congruent with their understanding of their own process. And maybe have tools and strategies. I don't know. The main tool and strategy was just talking on to myself and maybe shortening it into a documentary, which depends on getting a better computer. So yeah, I don't want to fall into the trap of using this energy to fight the system. I think that in talking to myself, I've created it as passive advocacy, so I don't feel it necessary to do that. And I can move on with my life, which was a movement that I was initiated into 6 years ago that got interpreted and translated into a personal mental illness. And I'd like to move into the non-personal creativity and not take a personal position on being angry at that, because it was all part of the journey, and hopefully there's some kind of helpfulness in this for other people. And the next year, I feel, for me is really important in seeing what's beyond all of that. Again, I'm not even 3 months into feeling clear, so what is this clarity going to create? I don't think it's designed to create more ranting against the system. I want to move away from that completely. I need to talk myself into creativity now that I've talked myself out of the mental health system. I've done a lot of talking myself out of the system, and I don't need to keep talking myself out of the system. So I need to talk myself into creativity. So maybe I will keep making videos talking myself into creativity on a daily basis, and perhaps make them shorter. And Tim Ferriss mentioned in one of his tips, thinking about the end game. And in terms of the end game for me, what is that? I would say quiet space, a respite, and a creative space. And the creative space could be a respite for creativity as opposed to mental distress. And perhaps by having a creative space that is dedicated to highly sensitive people who are very creative, that will help to channel some of that energy so it doesn't get turned into being interpreted as a personal problem when it's a universal energy. I also thought about publishing everything that I write and delaying it 6 months, so making this creative process interactive or shareable. And I did that by talking to myself in self-dialogue about mental health, but the process might look a little bit different in this new creative thing, because the self-dialogue process was have an insight or something I want to talk about, write it down, save it for later, and then talk about it on video. But if that's not what I'm creating only, then the process is going to look different. Maybe I use that new Dropbox paper to do a document daily and then share it, or I'm not sure what it'll look like, but sharing the creativity of the brain as opposed to sharing all these meanings related to creating context. It's creating something and sharing the creative process of creating that something that is different than the something I've been creating for this last year. And it looks like I'll be making another video.